in their Dominion Energy in their IRP, their Integrated Resource Plan, which they filed in May, proposes to double their greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, not reduce them to net zero by 2045, which is in the Virginia Clean Economy Act, but to double them, to go from 17 million metric tons in 2021, their inventory number, to 36 million metric tons by 2048, whereby they would be running all their gas plants, adding another 3,000 megawatts of gas, and running all three of their coal plants, including the one Mount Storm in West Virginia. That's their plan, which is freaking outrageous. I call it the down payment. The down payment on climate chaos is the 1,000 megawatt gas plant that they want to build in Chesterfield County, where I happen to live, but I'd be fighting it even if I didn't live here. And so the Chesterfield County NAACP has taken a position opposing this. They're joined by the usual environmental group suspects like the Sierra Club and Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Clean Virginia, etc. So anyway, there's a number of aspects to this thing. There's they need to get county zoning, and so we're hoping to be able to play a role in defeating the zoning requirement. They need to get an air permit, which would be next year sometime, and they'll need to go before the State Corporation Commission for approval. So this is a priority campaign for the Chesterfield County NAACP and for a lot of these state environmental organizations to defeat this gas plant. I might say that the reason Dominion justifies the doubling of the greenhouse gas emissions is because of the growth of data centers. And this gets to be an energy burden equity issue because all this new infrastructure, including transmission lines and new gas plants, they're going to shift the cost to all of us as ratepayers, when the reason they're building all this and spending all this money is to service the data centers, which have a lot of money. So there's a lot of issues entwined in this, and I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions about it. As I said, we'll be participating in opposing the zoning and participating, with the air permits and things like that. So this is a big deal. We should be going off of fossil fuels, and Dominion is more than doubling down. In fact, they're doubling down because they're planning to double their greenhouse gas emissions, which is kind of outrageous. Let me stop and see if there's any questions or if there's anything else you'd like to cover on this, Karen.
Thanks, Glenn. And I also want to welcome Glenn for joining us here. Just to give you an update, Glenn Besa is the ECJ of Chesterfield NAACP and was just giving us an update on efforts and activities that's going on with the proposed compressor station in Chesterfield. And
gas plant, actually.
I'm sorry, gas plant. I knew that.
I know you did.
And so I also put in the program agenda in the chat that you can follow along. So, and now you are open up for questions. So, go ahead, Glenn. Besa. Does anybody have any questions for Glenn?
Hi, Glenn. This is Jamie from the committee in Albemarle County, Virginia. Just curious if you're aware of any sort of coalitions beyond like folks like Clean Virginia that are sort of, and I'm specifically referencing county, city, municipalities that are coming together to oppose this in any way?
Not at this time. No. There are, what's driving this issue is the data centers. And the data centers is probably going to be the subject of legislation in the next General Assembly session. There's probably going to be a bill put in to require a study with regard to the impacts of data centers because they're growing topsy-turvy here, and they're requiring a tremendous amount of infrastructure and a lot of expense to our bills. As to the gas plant, most local governments look at gas plants as a asset because Dominion tells them it's going to be $2 million a year in additional tax revenue, et cetera. So at this point in time, we have an election in November, and the election for Board of Supervisors at this point in time is on a lot of issues, particularly development. And if the power shifts from Republicans to Democrats, then Dominion may have a hard time getting the zoning. If it stays in the current power structure, more than likely they'll get the zoning, and then the fight will continue in the DEQ, and particularly in the State Corporation Commission, where they have to get a certificate of public convenience and necessity to build a new gas plant and send the bills to us. Any other questions on that?
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah. Let me shift to this other topic that I had asked Karen to add, and that is the climate pollution, the US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. This is a program which has about $4.6 billion in competitive grants that will be applied, that will be available starting next year. There was a non-competitive grant made to Virginia DEQ for $3 million, to Washington Council of Governments for $3 million, to Hampton Roads Planning District for $1 million, and to Plan RVA, which is the Richmond metro area, for $1 million. This program is funding the establishment of the completion of a greenhouse gas inventory for each of these regions. It will also require them to do a preliminary climate action plan, and then ultimately a comprehensive climate action plan is due later. These climate action plans are important because they are going to identify specific measures or actions that local governments can take to reduce carbon emissions that are measurable. So they will be doing an inventory, and they will be developing plans that will demonstrate how they will reduce carbon and by how much. That is really important and significant to the climate fight. And the other thing is that these grants do favor low income and communities of color when they are, developed competitively. And the last thing, and the reason I bring this to your attention, is there is a requirement for a stakeholder process. So there will be 4 stakeholder processes: one for Metro DC, which is WashCOG will be running, one for DEQ, Virginia DEQ, for the state coordinated effort, and then one, of course, for the Metro Richmond area. Plan RVA is the name of the organization, and one for Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. So there's an opportunity, particularly representing the NAACP, to have people representing minority communities and low-income communities on these advisory boards to insist on actions that will benefit low-income communities, communities of color, because otherwise I'm concerned that they'll only go for the low-hanging fruit. I've been in some meetings already where they're talking about planting trees, and trees are great. They will help alleviate the heat island effect. But if we keep adding carbon to the atmosphere, they won't be enough. So looking at measures to actually reduce reliance on greenhouse gas, reliance on fossil fuels, for example, is really going to be critical. And that's the harder asks that we'll have if we aren't involved in this opportunity. I mean, I'll just say this: the whole Inflation Reduction Act is like this. I hope it's not a once in a lifetime effort, but it's certainly a once in a decade effort that we have to get hold of to take full advantage of the grants that are available to actually help people lower their utility bills, help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'm happy to provide more information. I have the names of the contacts for all 4 of the stakeholder, all 4 of the lead staff in those regions. And I've been sort of bugging them about their stakeholder processes. None of them have started them yet. Just was listening before I jumped on this call to Hampton Roads, and they're in the process of doing that. So it really will be key for us to help identify people that represents low income and communities of color, particularly on these panels that can really make a contribution and demand real action. Otherwise, we'll just see low hanging fruit. And the bottom line is we'll leave literally tens of millions of dollars on the table, particularly because we have a governor that doesn't believe in climate change. So I'll just stop there and say I'm happy. I'm going to put together some more information on this, and I'll send it to Karen, who can share it with you all, because I think we're getting close to getting these stakeholder groups assembled and there'll be a great opportunity for folks to get in there and start pushing hard for real measures that will cut carbon in measurable ways, which is unique. We haven't been really doing the math that we have to do. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions about that.
While everybody's thinking about their question, I just want to say that I thank you for bringing this to the group. I think it would be beneficial if we were to do a statewide letter with recommendations that we have representative NAACP representatives on each of these task force. And then maybe as a group come up with the approaches that we would like to see, because I think we should look at it not only regionally, but how everything is gonna interact in a cumulative manner, you know, so we can have like regional approaches as things are broken up, but also have a statewide lens to say, okay, if Hampton Roads needs something, what can we help support them on? So how can we coordinate on our statewide level, you know, just to make sure all of our regional messages are support each other. And then, you know, so I think, you know, this actually, Glenn, you know, the next bullet item for the agenda is just talking about the emergent issues, but I think because of the urgency of what this could you know, how influential it could be for the future, I think this should be our priority now. And maybe what I'll do is just postpone, everybody put the emergent issue, how do we address it in the back of our head, and then just focus collectively on how best to make sure that NAACP has a voice at the table and can help make transformative changes, I should say recommendations for transformative changes.
I'm happy to draft a letter for you to take a look at.
Yeah,
I thought that's a great suggestion. That might get the ball rolling because they are going to be assembling these stakeholder groups pretty quickly. Their preliminary climate action plans are due, I think, like April 1st of next year, so not too far away. I may have that date wrong, but it's definitely in early 2024. And they can actually start applying for competitive grants for programs like converting vehicles to EVs, for example, or, you know, doing things with public housing, for example, in terms of electrification of public housing. There's just a range of different things that they can do. It's a matter of getting smart people in the room with some imagination to actually, and experience to think about the things that we can actually do to actually cut carbon and measure the reductions in carbon emission reductions.
I have another question for you. Sorry, everybody. Is there, okay, so it's a grant program. It's broken out into different groups. Is there a central group? The reason why I'm asking is, you know, we meet monthly, but again, you know, you said this timeline's already moving forward. Does it make sense for, and what I would love to do is get a notice out to our members, you know, the mail-in list that I have for this group to say, start talking to your presidents, your ECJ chairs, and start picking up names. So when we do get those seats, we can immediately respond with, here are the names that we want in these task force on a regional level. But if we wanted to have somebody come and talk to us in the next 2 weeks or so, is there somebody we should reach out? Is maybe Danielle Sims is the person to reach out to with DEQ and ask her to say, can you come and talk to us? And or does that make sense? You know, or would that be beneficial? And I'll open that up to the group. And if it would be, I'd be happy to try and coordinate a meeting with whomever to get more info.
Tom Ballou is the lead staff person. He's with air pollution monitoring, and this task has been delved off to Virginia Department of Environmental Quality Air Division, and Tom Ballou is their air monitoring person, but he's been given the task of leading this. I've been told there was a PowerPoint presentation by the Air Division chief at the last Air Board meeting. I'm happy to send that around, that PowerPoint. And I think, in all honesty, while it would be great to hear from them, I think it might be great to hear from some other people. I know an attorney with the Sierra Club, I'm trying to think of his name right now, who did a presentation on the IRA and specifically talked about this program as well. And
Okay.
so it might be good, if you to hear from people who are on our side of the coin first, because then I think we're able to ask tougher questions of the agencies that are involved. And I'm trying to think of his name, but I could certainly see if we have the time, if you'd like to set up a meeting with somebody. This attorney with the Sierra Club is the person I know, but there may be other people like with Rewiring America or something like that are following this closely. I've been kind of beating the drum for the last 6 months, and I understand there's an attorney now who's been assigned to this task with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and I don't know him, but I'm going to reach out to him shortly too. So happy to work with you as to how best you think it. I think in all honesty, like I said, there's DEQ, and they're technically coordinating this, but each of the metropolitan areas that I mentioned, Metro Washington, Metro Hampton Roads, and Metro Richmond, are all able to pursue their own plans and their own grants. And obviously it might behoove them to coordinate, but if they're coordinating with DEQ and DEQ has got a governor that's hostile, then I don't exactly know how that'll work. I don't know. Thus far, there hasn't been enough done to actually determine whether DEQ is going to be an honest broker or whether they're going to be ordered to sabotage this effort. I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, why would you sabotage this when there's free money coming in? But at the same time, the governor's position against electric clean cars, his position against Reggie, his position against the Clean Climate Act, may well be that he'll be inclined to try and sabotage some of this. I don't know.
Right. Or he may just refuse to accept the money. I'm just waiting for that. Okay. Or maybe, yeah, that'd be great. And I have a call. I'm supposed to circle back with Danielle on the Environmental Justice Council. So I think it'll be great if we can have like 2 or 3 different minds just, presenting and, so I think that's a great idea. Okay. So I can, if you want to talk to Tom and Sierra Club, and I can reach out to Danielle with DEQ and SCLC.
Well, like I said, Tom Ballou is with DEQ too. He's actually the lead staffer, Tom Ballou.
Okay, that's what I have. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. No, and he, obviously Danielle is in the EG department. He's actually the one implementing the program, so she might arrange for him to make the presentation.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, that's perfect. Okay. All right. All right, I'm done with. Anybody else have any questions for Glenn?
Yeah, Glenn, this is Jamie again. And just for context, I work in the Albemarle County Climate Protection Office. And so we're following this stuff closely. First of all, thank you for bringing this up, and thank you for offering to draft something for the committee or the whole state branch to look at. I wanted to flag for you, just in case you weren't aware, there's an organization. So there's a separate funding opportunity, Solar for All, and its accompanying grant opportunities under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And that GGRF, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, there's an alliance called the GGRF Equity and Governance Best Practices Alliance. And I can send that in the chat if folks need it. But they put together a bunch of recommendations for how an IRA program should be governed and should incorporate equity principles. So there might be some good nuggets to pull out of their documentation. And they have a website. And I can send their name and hopefully get their link into the chat. So wanted to flag that for you first. Second, and related to that, Karen, just wanted to suggest that it's not DEQ, Department of Energy at the state is probably preparing to put in their application for the Solar for All. And the whole intent behind Solar for All is essentially to get disadvantaged communities rooftop solar, residential solar in different ways. And so that might be a good thing to track through Carrie Hearn at Department of Energy and make sure NAACP is weighing in on that effort as well. And in terms of the, like how NAACP structures its requests in the form of this letter, I also just want to flag for the group that the County of Albemarle has an equity lens, a climate and equity lens through which it passes all policy measures here at the county. I'd be happy, Glenn or Karen, to connect you with the director of the Office of Equity and Inclusion down here, who can maybe share some information about how we think about that, because there might be some good fodder to include in terms of how what NAACP recommends to DEQ or some of these other metropolitan areas in terms of how they're thinking about this opportunity. So let me know how I can be of assistance after this.
That's great. By the way, I'd love to see those links. So put them in the chat. And let me just say this: the reason the 4 areas, the states were able to apply, and I think it's like the 80 largest metropolitan statistical areas were able to apply. So obviously, Charlottesville and Albemarle County did not fall into that first catch. But as I understand it, I was just on a call, I think a PowerPoint. They said that even if you're not in one of those areas, you can still participate and make applications for some of these grants. Now that's that $4.6 billion that's there for this particular grant program. But and this goes to kind of what you were saying in terms of the other things that are out there. I believe, and I want to try to talk to some of the staff that are involved in implementing this, that if you put together a good climate action plan, you'll not only be able to take advantage of the grant program through the climate pollution reduction grant, the $4.6 billion, but you're really in a good position to tackle some of the other grants that are out there. I mean, there's literally hundreds of millions of dollars out there and other grant programs too. And I think that being aware of those grant programs like Solar for All and others like that could be incorporated into your climate action plan in a way that would clue you into all the different grants that are possible, because there is just so much money out there. It's kind of like a challenge to be aware of all of them, as you probably know from your work. And but I do think that getting these collaborative efforts together for these climate action plans would not only make them put them in a better position to take advantage of the $4.6 billion that's there for that program, but to make them aware of things like Solar for All and all the other programs that they can apply for. So thank you, Jamie. I look forward to seeing those links. And also that equity lens issue that you just raised too. I'd love to get in touch with those folks.
Great, I'll connect you, Glenn.
Thank you.
And do you have, well, I guess your email is on this invite, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to put it in the chat too.
Okay, thanks.
No one's talking. Did I miss anything? Sorry, I had to step away for a second.
Nope, we just wrapped up my piece and
Oh.
Jamie shared some information. Yeah.
And it's in the chat. Okay, perfect. And I would also like to welcome Brian from Arlington. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Did you have any questions or?
Sorry, I came in a little bit late. I was in a meeting until 8:30, so I heard this part of the conversation, but I did want to ask a question about the transportation forum that recently happened. But please correct me we haven't gotten to that part of the conversation yet.
We haven't gotten to that part yet. We're actually, I think we're there now. We were just talking about the climate pollution reduction grant and all of the other grants that are coming out. And
Yeah.
we were thinking of I was going to have a conversation about how do we address emergent issues, but because this is such a timely endeavor, I said, let's just put that in the back burner for now, and let's focus collectively how best we can make sure that we can have make a positive influence on how this grant program moves forward. And so I'm deferring the Emergent Issues Sub Committees conversation till probably January of next year.
Okay.
And so and then we can go in and talk about the transportation equity program next. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask Glen, because there was something, since Albemarle and Mecklenburg isn't a part of that either, right? They're not in those 4 catchment areas.
No, I don't think so. They actually are larger than I thought because they're the metropolitan statistical area. So they're much bigger than I understood. I thought like Plan RVA was much smaller, but I think the metropolitan statistical area goes pretty far east and the captures like King and Queen County. It's kind of weird. I've got the information with regard to I actually have the application forms that they filed with the EPA before they got their grants that lists all the jurisdictions. I don't think Mecklenburg is included.
And maybe that's something we can add in the letter, like, here, these are our recommendations, but we know we have outlying communities that are part of the association that we want to make sure that if not addressed now, that somehow that they're also included. And maybe even just asking what those programs are, that even though they're not a part of the big 4, that they still have access to, and we need proper education to let these areas out, Albemarle and Mecklenburg, because there's no even though it's a process that's just starting, we want to make sure that they do have a public outreach education piece for the other 4. The outside of the 4 to let them know what they can do. Because I'm afraid they're going to be programs, but a lot of people just won't know. Because
Right. They could conceivably be handled by DEQ, but I really don't know what DEQ is going to do yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think also getting folks, maybe, I don't know, Tom Blue and some, other folks, but we can try and figure that offline, because I've never heard of this program, and I think this is you brought it up to me like about a week ago or 2, and I think it's really, like you said, it's really important that we make comments from NAACP. Okay. All right. Thanks, Glenn. Transportation equity. So we did have and I wonder if I still have the program. I'm waiting for approval. No, I did attach it. Did I attach the program to? I think I published it a little bit too soon. But the program went well. Let me share my screen. And this is the program you're interested in, right, Brian?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. I don't know if you can see the screen here. I don't know how
Yes,
to,
I see your slides now.
I don't know how to get rid of this. Okay. This is weird. Let me see if I make it smaller. Okay, here we go. So that is, and I'll put the link to the webinar in the chat, but these were the comments that we received before we gave folks for the registration. We asked folks to ask if they had any questions to ask or any comments. And so the column on the left is the comments we received from the registration process. The comments on the right are comments we receive during the webinar, and then there were some questions that were asked. So if anybody who is on this call right now who are also on the webinar that night, please join in and help me fill in the blanks of if I missed anything. But it seemed as if a lot of the feedback we kept on getting from folks was a desire to move away from fossil-based transportation, a desire to move away from the auto-centric programs that we've been seeing and focus more on, bike, walking, public transportation. There was even a healthy conversation about, having public transportation agency provide zero fare transit in their communities, and how it is that something that would be feasible. So they also talked about how transportation would be able to impact the socioeconomic advancement of folks, how it's linked. One of the comments we had was, how does it, how transportation links to employment, eco-justice, poverty, vulnerability, and the like. And then Jamie was on as well and provided some information about the Tic Tac Center, which we're still trying to, which is another really great technical assistance program that's coming in online on the federal level. So those were some of the things that we talked about. We didn't really get to go into the conversation about how do we tie in reparations, but there was also some frustration that we heard as well. People are saying, we know what to do, but we're not doing it. We need to do real equity work. I'm sorry, can you hold on? I think room service is, they had missed part of my order, so I think they're back at the front door. 1 second, sorry. Glenn, if you were there, right? Or Jamie, if you want to jump in, and yeah. I'll be right back. Jamie? 1 second.
Yeah, actually, I think Sandrina was there. I think a different Jamie might have been there, but I wasn't able to make that one.
I'm actually taking a look at my notes. Everything that Karen has shared so far is aligning with what I'm remembering, but I'm actually trying to refresh my own memory about that webinar.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the webinar as it was happening, but I did go back to watch the recording. And one question I had that I don't think was really addressed in full was around what role can the state play in addressing the transportation inequities. I know there's, of course, a lot of overlap between in some areas, say for here in Arlington, there's some land that's jointly owned by WMATA, the county, as well as VDOT. So my questions were more along the lines of, what roles can the state play either to expedite transportation projects that would serve these communities that need it most, or what way can our legislators step up so that we have more equitable transportation access across communities?
That is a really great question. Let's see. Well, till this point, the state has been making comments and helping, I guess, what do you call it? Write legislation, I should say, working with other partners during the General Assembly session, right? So we helped write, the House bill, like a couple years ago, House Bill 585, which, addressed making, whenever there are any transportation improvements, to make sure that equity was part of it, but also that it looked at the comprehensive planning process while doing so to ensure that, the land use, that major cities also look at transit-oriented development strategies and solutions when they're looking at their transportation improvements. So those are one of the ways that I would say that we would be able to influence transportation policy here in the Commonwealth. And I think, you know, since we're a Dillon rule state, I think there's a lot of impact associated with those things. On a local level, I think that is something the local units would need to take the charge and say, this is what we want. And the state would be able to provide any support in reaching out to elected officials and or transportation agencies. But I think that is something as a group and collectively, we need to come up with a statewide transportation I guess I don't want to say blueprint or something like that, in which it's great that we do a lot of things on a local level, but we also have to talk about transportation, the transportation system on a bigger level. And Brian, we're not having that conversation. And I think that is something that needs to happen. Was somebody saying something? So I think part of it would be what the state can do is coming up with a comprehensive statewide transportation plan. Like, this is what we want to see for the Commonwealth, and have it based on, and then all of the local units would need to chime in. And then that is something that we can move forward with. But like I said, there are a lot of different local, state won't go into Arlington and say, you know, this is what you need to do with your transportation. We would follow your lead on that. Was there a particular question you had in mind, or is there anything that you think we should be doing that you have an idea on?
I guess we'll one from a local perspective and at a broader level. So here in Arlington, I'm on the Transportation Commission. So I've done walkthroughs of various communities here, particularly in South Arlington, which is unfortunately more susceptible to these kind of inequities across the board, not just in transportation, but in healthcare access and resources and housing as well. And there's a couple of communities I can think of two off the top of my head. There's Green Valley, which is a traditionally Black community, and Arlington View, which used to be a traditionally Black community, that have a pretty visible disparity in metro bus stops, for example. And of course, counterparts in Northern Arlington tend to be wider, more affluent. You don't see those disparities. So that's something I think at the local level we should be more attuned to, is, not just in terms of how timely our bus services, whether they be our local buses, so for example, in Arlington, the ART service, or the metro buses, but how many stops are there so that people are incentivized to use them and we reduce the amount of cars on the road. Additionally, I think we should be looking at how we can improve the general non-vehicle infrastructure across the state, so that we begin to transition from their car to vision of
Hey, Brian, did you change locations? You're starting to get a little choppy. Are you moving?
I'm hearing that right now, but
I think we lost you completely now.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was just walking into my apartment from a down.
Nope, we lost you again. We lost you again.
Oh.
We lost you again.
How's this?
That's better. Stay there.
Okay,
Don't.
great. Yeah, I'm just gonna stand perfectly still now. So yeah, it's kind of to wrap it up, just looking at how we can improve our larger infrastructure system to accommodate greener forms of transportation, like say a heavy rail system across the Commonwealth. I know we put a lot of investments during Governor McAuliffe's administration to do the high-speed driving pass system, but I think we really need to be investing in something that is greener, reliable, and has an equitable access across the Commonwealth and doesn't depend on vehicles.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I know Delegate McQuinn had done a study, and I'll look up the report and put it in I don't have it right in front of me, but they did a statewide study on modernizing Virginia's transportation system. And it looked at things like rail, but it also looked at really granular things on, how do we improve bus service and making sure that the right amenities for bus are available, bus stops and all of those things. And so there is effort to do so. So on a state level, it is going to be one, looking for the budget, making sure that the budget is being allocated in the right place. Right now, most of the major transportation projects are funded through Smart Scale. And a while back, Danny and Tripp, who were on the webinar, and other people like Stuart, and were very integral in development a more equitable Smart Scale and moving it away from only automobiles being competitive for these funds, and making sure that bike and sidewalk and those types of transportation are also competitive. I do know that is at risk. I think Tripp may have mentioned it during the webinar. I can't remember, but that is something that, on a state level, making sure that we protect the Smart Scale. But whenever it's politically viable, being part of writing those new policies and legislation to make sure that these types of rail and bike and sidewalk projects are even more competitive than they are now. There were some efforts to do so that were suspended during the last election, because we just didn't want anybody to even touch Smart Scale, so we were trying to keep it under the radar. But so right now it's just how do we protect it, and then when the opportune time comes back on. Other things is looking at land use on a state level, changing our land use. So that's another thing that we can do on a state level. And so there are a lot of different things, but this is, unfortunately, the last 2 years, you probably saw a slowdown on clean transportation projects, funding for it, and good legislation being passed. And that's why National is promoting the Clean Bus Grant Program. So we're encouraging all of our units to reach out to their local school boards and board of supervisors to apply for the funding to electrify their school bus fleets. And so that's another thing, in addition to that infrastructure, is going to localities and schools and making sure that they are moving towards electrification and moving away from those fossil fuel and gas diesel vehicles. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do. I will admit we don't work with Danny with FTA and Virginians for High-Speed Rail as closely as we should. Those are the two lead agents that are looking at the rail transportation system. And so how do we, we need more people at the table to start getting involved with those things. And one of the most important things, which you're already doing, is being a member of your local transportation. I just joined the Fairfax Transportation and I'm on NVTA, and so getting folks at the table for when those project priorities are being chosen, that we have somebody at the table that's going to have that lens, because it's an uphill battle at those tables, as you know. So that is definitely something that we should try and pick up in 2024. I submitted my legislative priorities, and transportation continues to be one of them. And so, and I think starting, we'll have to look at the bills that are being passed and make sure we protect or make sure we get people to reach out to their legislators for the right bills to allow for those transportation projects to happen. But like the funding, and you guys can cut me off because I can ramble on transportation forever, but but like what the grant fund that Glen brought up, it's very important that if we do have a statewide approach, that we kind of coordinate it. So it's a coordinated message that we're going to have across the board, or at least within our major cities and emerging cities.
On that point, Karen, and pardon my ignorance, feel free to direct me to another resource. What is the state NAACP position on transit, walking, cycling versus EVs in terms of priorities or where resources should be directed by VDOT, et cetera?
Honestly, I think for NAACP, our focus would be more on public transit versus single EV rebates. So bike, pedestrian infrastructure, improved transit would be the top priority. Electrification is on fleets would be more of a priority.
Is that already a policy position that's published?
I don't think so openly, but yes. And I can I'll put that in our, but I will say, and you bring up a really great question. So, resolutions, can be heard at the upcoming convention. And they, I believe, are due to the state convention by the 20th of October. I think I have to double check on that date. And so there could be units that create a resolution on some form of policy that can be submitted. It would be voted on, and then it would become part of a permanent part of Virginia's book of resolutions, and that would be an official formal policy. But what I was talking about was each year we have and it's very high level. These are the things that we're going to be pushing. And so, when I say clean and affordable transportation. And so in my brain, that includes everything that we're talking about. But how do we prioritize it is also looking at what's going to bring the most benefit to the larger amount of people at the same time versus, so the more singular it becomes, the lesser it becomes a priority for what we're going out for now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's so many. So I think from my perspective, EVs, in addition to just kind of perpetuating and entrenching a broken transportation system that relies so much on mostly individually driven vehicles that are polluting neighborhoods, even putting EVs on the same level as transit doesn't allow us to reach the long-term emissions goals that we need to because of the production of the EVs, the generation of all those EVs that are going to continue, at least for a while, to use fossil fuels to charge, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it would be great, and I can't say I'm in a position to say whether we would do anything from Albemarle, but I think it would be great if somebody put that forward as a resolution for consideration at the end of the month.
Mhm. Any takers? We'll see. We can try and figure something out. We've got a little bit of days, but I'm gonna be traveling for the next couple weeks, so I'm not gonna promise anything because my time's gonna be significantly limited. But I think as we move forward, I think even if there isn't a resolution that goes through, I think the greater, what's gonna benefit more people at once, is that, and I really love what you said, Jamie, that's also another way of looking at it, but I'm just thinking, in terms of the cost of the vehicle, and you have people who don't even want to drive or aren't able to drive, and so I think those individuals should be a primary concern. Yeah. Are there any other questions, or I don't know if I answered your question, Brian, or if this is something, but I do agree that there needs to be a more coordinated approach for transportation on a state level than what is happening, but there are some things that are already going on, but if there's more things we can and should be doing, that is definitely something that we need to start doing.
No, I really appreciate that. And you did answer my question. I do think I need to do more research on my own as well and to see like what efforts have already been taken in addition to what you've mentioned. But I would appreciate since you brought up the prospect of perhaps putting together a sort of platform of what our transportation goals are for the Commonwealth, to get some insight as to what that process looks like and how to potentially participate along the road. But I do think a lot of what's been brought up here, as well as in the presentation, has been very helpful.
Okay, great. I look forward to the continued conversations. Are there any other questions on the transportation?
Yeah, real quick. Are we coordinating with VCN? They put together their common agenda of state programs, and they have, whole sections of transportation stuff, that they're doing. So I don't know how much NAACP coordinates with them anymore, or.
I mean, I'm still on the board, but we are not officially a part of VCN, but we do have, interactions with VCN on their common agenda, particularly their transportation stuff. Mhm. All right, so I think the only other thing we have on here is I'll leave some space here if there are any report outs from the field, or if any units have any questions or wanted to ask any questions about what they're working on. And I normally